It's a pleasure to have met you 6 months ago and see that the equipment is working as it should. There's a little history to this office that you may not be aware of. In 1980, Dr. Brown and I had the opportunity to meet in a rather normal way. A person meets a chiropractor. I had hurt my back. And I asked around Iowa City for a chiropractor who was gentle and I didn't know anything about chiropractic. And I just asked around and said, well, who's doing gentle adjusting? And being an engineer, is anyone in the area using instrumentation? And someone said, well, Dr. Myron Brown does, and he's in West Liberty, which is a considerable drive for us, but I felt it was worth it. On our first visit, Dr. Brown had used the Pierce Stillwagon DTG instrument with a little chart recorder and explained to me that he was very dissatisfied with the stability of that instrument. A lot of times on a day when the office was cooler or warmer, or he just picked it up and held it for a while, the graphs would just go all over the place. He had no faith in what he was reading unless he wrapped this with a towel and gingerly used it. Having just worked on a infrared project for a roofing company, I knew immediately what the instrument needed, and so my first challenge from him was to make this DTG work. We added a barrel and a lens and some insulation. We did some circuit changes on the inside, and now we've got an instrument that is extremely stable, and Dr. Brown was just elated. And he said, what I really need, and this is where he started to take time and explain to me how chiropractic came about, how Dr. Palmer used thermocouples in the 20s, and how important these temperature graphs were. He said, what we really need is a two-channel instrument. We've got to look at both sides of the spine, and we need to record it on a computer. And this was back when a PC was $7,000, and I was thinking, who can afford this? But he insisted that we somehow record these graphs on computers so they could be easily overlaid as you had been demonstrating today. And it took several years, in fact many years. We worked some with Sherman College. Dr. Ralph Boone at the time was their director of research. He had some software that would look for patterns from a mathematical standpoint, but he needed an instrument that would input thermal data into a computer so that his software had access to it. So it was a very nice marriage there between his research and our desire to build the instrument that Dr. Myron Brown wanted built. So over the years, Dr. Crowder worked with us. He was a mentor to Dr. Brown. And between Dr. Crowder and Dr. Brown, that was my initial education into what chiropractic was all about. And as I said before that, I had no idea. When I saw these pattern graphs repeating, almost like fingerprints traced right on top of one graph on the other, months, even years apart, that's what lit the fire and said there's something here that nobody knows about, that's too important to miss. That's at the point when we really dedicated our company in the late 80s totally to the development and research of instrumentation and other aspects of chiropractic that could so objectively be measured. So this is a neat time, and it's almost a full circle. Dr. Myron Brown is now down again at Sherman College, and I believe he is the provost and vice president of the school. So I'm really looking forward to our continued involvement with research at Sherman.
Right. As an aside, my first exposure to the Titron was as an intern in Dr. Crowder's office, and comparing the Titron to the prior and older equipment that he used, I could see the availability problems of the older equipment and many of the benefits of having the Titron with the visual display on the computer and the to be able to store the information other than on paper. And so I decided quite early on as an intern in his office that I would have a Titron.
Yeah. If you would bring up Ron Gable's full spine graph again, one of the neat things that infrared has given us the ability to do is actually measure true skin temperature, not just a difference from left to right like the thermocouples. So if we go ahead and go to we'll explain this graph on the left is actually the true skin temperature on the left, the graph on the right, the temperature on the right side of the spine, and this was never available before in instrumentation. By seeing these graphs, a person can look for chronic cold areas and do a little forensic analysis as to what's going on. And if we go to the first the bar graph, and then D for the direct temperatures, it's really easy for a patient to see areas that are cold, especially bilaterally cold, and that's just not normal. Dr. Pierce always talked about having the temperatures on the left and right side of the spine both be very, very nice clear lines and rising in temperature as one approaches the occiput. So with this software, we're really able to track all these different facets of the thermogram. And the beautiful part is everything that B.J. Palmer did in the clinic to the end of balancing temperatures today is absolutely proven with over 8,000 peer-reviewed papers in thermography, medical papers that have met the test of a peer review, all agree with symmetry in the body for temperature.
Right.
There's even some stats that say any temperature differences that exist on the body greater than 0.8 degrees centigrade that are consistent at the same level coincide with over 90%, 96% correlation with some pathology somewhere in the body.
Right.
So it's the whole scientific world is now proving chiropractic,
Right.
and it's an exciting time. So I'm glad you're here.
The harder they try to disprove it with their studies, they end up proving it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The only thing they're afraid to say is the word chiropractic.
Right.
But the physiologists, the PhDs in neurology and physiology all understand this perfectly. The only thing that Dr. Palmer had a little wrong was where he thought the heat was coming from. And today, we know it is actually from the capillary beds in the skin, the dermatome levels that are controlled by the nervous system.
Yeah.
But his clinical expectations were perfect.
As a practitioner that needs some kind of a indicator as to the activity of the nervous system, thermography is crucial because of in the periphery, the sympathetic nervous system controls the blood flow. And basically, there's a direct correlation as to the activity of the sympathetic branch of the nervous system and the temperature that you read at the radiated off the skin or at the actual skin temperature. So it is absolutely completely crucial to me, in my thinking, that you have an inroads to the activity of the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people refer to thermography as a window
Exactly.
into the
Dr.
nervous
Crowder
system.
used to say, is a window to the sympathetic nervous system.
A lot of doctors ask, is there a value to looking at a full picture of the whole back? And I explored that to a very great extent with some neurologists around the country back in the mid '80s. And the answer was that if a disturbance is caused by a vertebral level in the spine, the most instant place it's going to display itself and the most sensitive place that it's going to be displayed is paraspinally. As you move out from that area, you could be looking at trigger points and peripheral insults or actually visceral problems that feed back and affect those dermatomes.
Right.
So it was really underlined that if you're working on the back, if you're adjusting the spine, the most important place to scan is paraspinally.
Correct.
We also do the software for the camera systems and offer camera systems, and they're neat diagnostic tools for lots of disorders, like does a person have an appendicitis coming on, or do they just have a stomach ache? A thermogram will show that in seconds when you look at those dermatomes that are associated with the nerve root going to the appendix.
Right.
Just an example of many, many ways to use thermography. Breast cancer screening is a very important tool that thermography can handle, because the capillary beds that form to feed a tumor can be seen thermographically up to 6 years before a tumor is large enough to be seen in a mammogram.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is balance these grafts, let the nervous system do its job.
Right.
And so many of our diseases that we deal with today
Yeah.
would probably never even show themselves. Chiropractic is the future.